हेलो। आज हम पढ़ेंगे चैप्टर 8 मेक योर एलाइज मेक योर एटीट्यूड्स योर एलाइज। कैन यू रीड minds? Reading minds is easier than you think. Perhaps you have never thought of it, but you read the minds of other people and they read your mind every day. How do we do it? We do it automatically. Through attitude appraisals. Remember the song, you don't need to know the language. Remember the song, you don't need to know the language to say you are in love. Bing Crosby made it famous many years ago. There is a whole book full of applied psychology packed into those simple lyrics. You don't need to know the language to say you are in love. Anyone who has ever been in love knows that. And you don't need to know any language to say that I like you, or I despise you, or I think you are important or unimportant, or I envy you. You don't need to know words or to use words to say I like my job, or I am bored, or I am hungry. People speak without a sound. How we think shows through in how we act. Attitudes are mirrors of the mind. They reflect thinking. You can read the mind of the fellow sitting at a desk. You sense by observing his expressions and mannerisms how he feels. You can sense by observing his expressions and mannerisms how he feels towards his job. You can read the minds of salesmen, students, husbands, and wives. You not only can you do the expert actors, those in demand in movies and television year after year, in a sense, are not actors at all. They don't play their roles. Instead, they lose their own identity and actually think and feel like the character they are playing. They have got to, else they would look like phonies and their ratings would plunge. Attitudes do more than showing through. They sound through too. A secretary does more than identify an office when he says good morning, Mr. Shoemaker's office. In just 5 words, one secretary says, I like you, I am glad you are calling, I think you are important, I like my job. But another secretary saying exactly the same words tells you, you bothered me, I wish you had not called, I am bothered with my job and I don't like people who bother me. We read attitudes through expressions and voice tones and inflections. Here is why. In the long history of humankind, a speaking language even remotely resembling what we use today is a very recent invention. So recent, you might say, in terms of the great clocks of time, that we developed a language only this morning. For millions and millions of years, people got by with little more than moans and groans and grunts and growls. So for millions of years, people communicated with other people by body and facial expressions and sounds, not words. And we still communicate our attitudes, our feelings towards people and things the same way. Aside from direct body contact, body movements, facial expressions and sound are the only ways we have to communicate with infants, and those young ones show an uncanny ability to spot the phony. Professor Edwin H. Shell, one of America's most respected authorities on leadership, says obviously there is something more than facilities and competence. that makes for accomplishment. I have come to believe that this linkage factor, this catalyst, if you will, can be defined in a single word: attitude. When our attitude is right, our abilities reach a maximum of effectiveness and good results inevitably follow. Attitudes do make the difference. Salesmen with the right attitude beat their quotas. Students with the right attitude make as right attitude pave the way to really happy married life. Right attitude make you effective in dealing with people, enable you to develop as a leader. Right attitude win for you in every situation. Grow these three attitude, make them your allies in everything you do. Grow the attitude of I am activated, grow the attitude of you are important, grow the attitude of service first. Now let's see how. Years ago, when I was a college sophomore, I enrolled in an American history class. I remember the class vividly, not because I learned much about American history, but because in an unusual way, I learned this basic principle of successful living. To activate others, you must first activate yourself. The history class was very large and it was held in a fan-shaped auditorium. The professor, who was middle-aged fellow and apparently well educated, was nevertheless pathetically dull. Rather than interpret history as an alive fascinating subject, the professor merely cited one date factor after another. It was a frightful wonder how he could possibly make such an interesting subject so terribly dull, but he did. You can imagine the effect the professor's boredom had on students. Talking and sleeping got so out of hand that the professor had to assistants patrol the cells to break up students' conversations and wake up those who had dozed off. Occasionally, the professor would stop and shaking his finger at the class would say, I am warning you, you have got to pay attention to what I say, you have got to stop this talking, and that is all there is to it. This of course made little impression on his students, many of whom as veterans had gambled their lives. Only months before had made history on islands and in the bombers. As I sat there watching this potentially great wonderful experience turn into a disgusting farce, I found myself wrestling with the question, why are the students ignoring what the professor has to say? The answer came: the students had no interest in what the professor was saying because the professor himself had no interest. He was bothered with history and it showed through. To activate others, to get them to be enthusiastic, you must first be enthusiastic yourself. Over the years, I have tested this principle in hundreds of different situations. It always holds true. A man who lacks enthusiasm never develops it in another, but a person who is enthusiastic soon has enthusiastic followers. The enthusiastic salesman need never worry about unenthusiastic buyers. The enthusiastic teacher need never worry about disinterested students. The activated minister need never be distressed by a sleepy congregation.